Hey guys, welcome to another photography class, Christmas edition, my favorite. I'm going to answer a few questions that I always get this time of year. If I miss something that you were really hoping to learn about, or if I don't go over something fully enough for you, just ask me. I'll explain. I'll flesh it out for you, no problem. Or if there's enough interest, I will do a part 2. Before we get started, I should just note that I am going to be talking mostly about a camera that you have some manual control with. So I have an SLR, lots of point and shoots have manual control options, but even phones now, you can get apps that help you with manual controls. So I do apologize if some of this isn't perfectly relevant to you, but I think most of it is going to be transferable. Okay, so the first question is one that I get asked a lot, and it's how to take a nice picture of your Christmas tree. So first of all, I'm going to tell you to leave a light on. And that might seem counterintuitive because you're trying to get picture with all of the sparkling mini lights on the tree. But trust me on this one, it's going to even out your exposure a little bit and light up all of the darker ornaments and all of the tree branches on your tree. The lights themselves should show up. If you find your overhead light too harsh, maybe try a lamp or something, but basically have some other source of light going in your room, and that'll help to illuminate the ornaments on your tree. So the other thing is that we're going to want to have a very slow shutter speed. That's going to allow your camera to absorb all of the mini lights and the ambiance around them. So again, this goes back to if your overhead light is a little too harsh, you might want to tone it down. If you have a dimmer, if you have a lamp, something like that. If you're not sure what I mean by slow shutter speed, go back a couple videos. There's one there, I think dedicated to shutter speed, but I can't really remember. So because we're using a slow shutter speed, we're going to need to use a tripod. I'm going to use the word tripod, but what I really mean is any surface that you can put your camera down on and it will be sturdy. So you can use a box, you can use furniture, you can use a shelf, anything at all that will allow you to sit your camera down and have it sit nice and steady. Because we're going to be using a slow shutter speed and a tripod, you're also going to want to use either a remote or your self-timer. Even the act of pushing the button wiggles the camera just enough that when you have a really slow shutter speed, you get that as blur. That records as blur. So you don't want any blur at all. We want a nice sharp image. So use your self-timer or use a remote if you have one. That's going to help. Okay, so another thing that I often get is people asking about bokeh. Sometimes they don't know what the word is, but they show me a picture that looks like this. And they ask me how to achieve that effect. So the answer, you're probably not going to be able to do it with a phone. Sorry phone people. You need something that has a large lens because you need a large aperture. So that bokeh is actually blur, and it's created by having a really wide aperture. So let's just say f2.8 or bigger. So 2.8 to 1.8, etc. It's also created by being out of focus. So if you're trying to make your tree, your Christmas tree look like that and have that bokeh effect, your tree is going to have to be out of focus. So what that means is you can either use manual focus and just pull the focus away from the tree, or if you want to use autofocus, you totally can. You can put your hand up, focus on it, move your hand, take a picture. Or if you want something in the foreground, like another ornament, another decoration, put that 10 feet or more from the tree, focus on that, and your tree should light up nice and pretty and sparkly and full of bokeh. Okay, so another thing people ask me a lot about is taking portraits in front of the Christmas tree. So it could be people or pets, or I guess it could be other ornaments, but mostly it's people or pets. And if you've had a hard time with this in the past, don't feel bad. It really is kind of a difficult thing to manage because either you're using flash and your people are nice and lit up, or you're using a slow shutter speed and your tree looks great, but your people are all blurry or yellow. So if that sounds familiar, that's what we're going to talk about. All right, so if you have a camera kind of like this, and if it has a mode dial on it like this, and you have a night mode, use it. It's the easiest way to get a nice picture of people in front of your Christmas tree, because what it's going to do is it's going to use your pop-up flash, and it's going to give a little bit of a fire, and it's going to light up the people's faces, but then it's also going to use a slow shutter speed to absorb the pretty Christmas tree ambiance in combination. Now, those people are still going to be moving during that long shutter speed, but because of that flash at the beginning, we've captured their faces nice and solid and no blur, so it's going to look good. If you're interested in doing it the manual way, it's just put your pop-up flash on in a slow shutter speed. It's gonna take a lot of experimenting, but it's kind of fun to play with. If you don't have willing participants or your models are looking to escape as fast as possible, practice with something else, anything else, like a decoration or something. If you have a little stuffed bear or something, put it there and practice with the flash and the exposure just until you get that right. Again, it's one of those things, I can't give you a magic set of numbers that's gonna work. You're probably gonna need maybe a half a second shutter to absorb that light from the Christmas tree and your pop-up flash on fill flash mode, if that's an option for you, and away you go. Now, the other thing that you can do too, if you have a flash like this that has a movable head on it, you can direct it upwards, and what that's gonna do is send the light straight at your ceiling. Unless you have vaulted ceilings, then it might not work. Then you can flash it backwards like that so that you're hitting the wall behind you. As long as it's bouncing off of something and then back at your subject, you're gonna get sort of the same effect as the pop-up flash, where it's going to fill a little bit and then the slow shutter speed is going to sort of fill in the rest. So this is just a general tip, but if you're not using flash and you're taking pictures of, let's say, kids putting ornaments on trees or pets sniffing around presents under the tree. So you want that kind of low light look and the warm glow of the Christmas lights, but without having any kind of like harsh, flat flash. What you're gonna have to do is raise your ISO. So if you're not familiar with ISO, I talk a little bit more about it in, I think, the very first video I posted. But basically, ISO is the easy one. It's the one where the higher the number, the more sensitive your camera is to the light coming in. So even the little tiny lights on the Christmas tree, your camera's gonna be really, really sensitive. Pick it up really easy and you're gonna get a nice bright picture, because if you're hand holding your camera or if you're taking pictures of moving subjects, so again, going back to kids putting decorations on trees, for example, you're definitely gonna want at least, at the very, very least, 1/60th of a second for your shutter speed. You can open your aperture, as wide as you can. That's going to help. You have to watch your focus when you have a really wide aperture. You're going to have to nail it, because otherwise if you focus on, let's just say, something that's 6 inches in front of my face, I'm going to be blurry. That's the only downside with a big, big aperture. I'm getting off topic. We've gone over this in previous videos, but my point is raise your ISO to get the shutter speed that you need, and you can open your aperture as wide as you need to as well. Okay, this is another general tip, but if you have in the past found that your Christmas photos look really, really yellow or reddish, the reason is because most Christmas lights, especially like the old school style, LEDs are a little bit cooler, but the old school type lights, they're very warm. Like you can even see it right there. That looks more yellow gold than pure white. So if you have a lot of that and that's your main light source, especially if you're using a slower shutter speed to kind of absorb all of that, your image is going to turn kind of yellow. So what you can do, unless you're looking for that, but if you really want to try knocking down some of that yellow, set your white balance to tungsten. Tungsten is usually the one that looks like a little old school Edison light bulb. Let's talk about outdoor photography and your outdoor decorations. So specifically, just for an example, I'm going to talk about your house with lights on it, but it should apply to almost everything. So the biggest mistake that most people make is they wait until it's completely dark to go outside and take pictures of their house. And so what you end up getting is really bright lights and everything else is like black, like a complete shadow, which is fine if that's what you're going for. But if you'd like a more balanced exposure where you can still see your house, you can see maybe some detail in the sky, you can see maybe some detail in the landscaping, whatever it is that you want to highlight, the biggest tip I can give you is to go out before it gets dark and get set up. Now, again, it's all dependent on any other ambient light. If you have street lights nearby, if you have other houses nearby that are lit up, or if you're like me and you're way out in the country and it's pitch black all around you. So I can't give you an exact number to try, but the really cool thing to try to experiment is to take a picture every 5 or 10 minutes as it gets darker. What you're going to end up with is something that looks like this. Instead of black sky, black house, and just really bright spots of lights. You're going to get some detail in the sky. You're going to get some detail in the house, things like that. I stole that image, by the way. So if you miss your chance and you go out after dark, you might think, well, it's no problem. I can just slow my shutter speed down and I'll absorb that ambient light and I will be able to expose the house, the sky, etc. And you're right, but the problem is all of the lights on the house are going to be so blown out that you're going to lose any color or detail around them. So give it a try at twilight instead of pure darkness. So the next tip I have is about composition and really applies anytime, not just at Christmas, but I think it's worth mentioning again. So when you're taking a picture, if you have time to stop and analyze your surroundings, try to look at what's in frame. And if there's any clutter, just move it. Just move it aside so that it's outside of your frame. You're going to be very happy that you did when you can focus on your subject more than things that are around. If there's stuff that's in the background that's sort of adding to your image, right? So like right now, like I shoved some garland back there to have a pretty Christmassy background. And you can do that sort of thing as long as it's not taking away from your subject, because that's what you really need and want to focus on. On that note, you can also use a slightly longer focal length to help you narrow your field of view. So you can zoom in on, let's go back to the example of the kid putting Christmas ornaments on the tree. If you zoom way, way, way in, it's going to do two things for you. First of all, it's going to cut out anything extraneous and it's going to really focus on that subject that you really want to focus on. And the other thing it's going to do too, depending on how much you zoom in, is it might kind of blur the background a little bit for you too. Again, helping to focus on your subject. Another thing to try to keep in mind is having a layered scene. So a foreground, a midground, and a background. And what I mean by that is, okay, here. Let's say I wanted to take my own portrait. I would have, let's just say something like this in the foreground, and it can be kind of blurry, right? Because that's not what you want to focus on. And then I'm in the midground, and then I've got like this stuff in the background. Do you know what I mean? You can have it anywhere. You can have it on the sides and sort of framing your image, whatever have you. Just something in the foreground, something in the midground, something in the background. It gives your image a lot of depth. Okay, so that's it for now. But if there was anything that I didn't go over, if there was anything that I did go over that you'd like me to go over in more detail, or maybe I brought up something that made you think of something else, let me know. If there's enough interest, I'll do a part 2. And but if not, I can just answer your questions. You can private message me, or you can just kind of message me whenever I post this. Whatever you want. I love talking about photography and I love talking about Christmas. So those are two of my favorite subjects. I'm happy to talk about them forever and ever and ever. But I'm hungry and it's lunchtime. So I'm going to stop here. Okay. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.